Revel decides to abandon rideshare and focus solely on DC fast charging, and NEVI is back in business. Two big headlines in one day. Let's get into it. So it's been a very busy day on the news wires, and I didn't think either one of these two stories should wait a week until the next update. So I was going to do an update, and then the second story kind of popped in there as well. So I'm just combining it into a single story. Let's start with the Revel story because very significant. They operate a ride-hail service in Manhattan, and apparently they've been having a time competing with Uber and Lyft. And they've decided instead of continuing to try to make enemies with someone who they could be a partner with, instead they're divesting themselves of their rideshare business and focusing solely on DC fast charging. But their DC fast charging business, although it's going to be open to the public, really is going to be designated for ride-hail refueling of electric cars. Basically, the major partnership being announced today is with Uber. But I'll get into that in just a second. So what happened is Revel was operating a ride-hail fleet in Manhattan, and they were having a hard time finding refueling places for them. So they just started kind of as an ancillary thing, putting in refueling stations for electric vehicles in kind of off the beaten path places where rideshare people can kind of camp for their next fare and also get refueling for their electric car at the same time. It just kind of was a synergy for the business they were in. But what it turned out to be is also Uber was helping with the build of the cost of the build of the stations by guaranteeing them a certain number of kilowatt hours prepaid sort of thing, or at a certain rate. There was a negotiation between Uber and Revel for the use of their stations. And clearly what happened is they just looked at their opportunities and their expansion into other markets and how they could do that. And with nationwide partners like Uber and Lyft, who are looking for people to provide the refueling for their fleets, and their fleets is a little bit of an ambiguous term because these are independent operators by and large. But if you offer through contracts, discounted rates for those people, it draws them into your depot. And it also gives them a convenient place where they're welcome and, they're not going to be frowned upon. We've all experienced, going into an electric vehicle charging station and someone who's obviously either an Uber or Lyft just kind of camped out there charging up to like 90, 100% because they're waiting for the next fare, and why not continue to charge because they're going to burn that off right away anyway. But it seems as though, like I've heard it described as clogging up a DC fast charger. Now, my personal opinion, it's a public DC fast charger. They have just as much right to be there as anyone else, so I don't hold that same view, but I have heard that described before. And there's definitely a load on the system, the rideshare population, because they have very heavily adopted electric vehicles because the cost for the duty cycle of a transportation business, I guess is a way of describing it, is less with an electric vehicle. So there's fewer maintenance costs, there's no oil changes, and refueling at home, if you can find the right price in the public as well, is less than gas. So it's been a very noticeable presence at public DC fast chargers with ride-hail people filling up. So what this could conceivably do is, if Revel completes what they're describing, and it says right here 400 stalls across LA, San Francisco, and New York by the end of the year, and as many as 2,000 by the end of 2030, or by 2030. I'll get to that in just a second. If they do that, what's likely to happen, and discounted rates offered to Uber drivers, it'll pull those people away from the public DC fast chargers and put them into these rideshare depots where they're offered discounted rates, and then the public DC fast chargers are then opened up for the public at large. People who live in the neighborhood or people who are driving through are not contending for those stalls with rideshare people. And in the NREL 2023 study, I believe it was somewhere around 28%, and the study is a little bit dated because the times change, but it was a large percentage of the overall charging session in a given day was expected to be used by ride-hail operators, and something like 28%, if I remember the number correctly, and I'll have to look it up here in just a second. I apologize, I don't have it ready. But point being, anyway, the NREL study is a little bit out of date, so it's not really too important what their exact number was. But the point is, a large slice of the overall pie of electric vehicle charging was going to be consumed by ride share drivers. Now, if those rideshare drivers are pooled into a depot where they're welcome and accommodated and provided discounted charging rates, it kind of segments that population from people who are just driving EVs because that's their mode of transportation. So, all in all, it's a terrific idea, and there's kind of been talk that this really should be the way it should go going forward, that there should be ride-hail depots for refueling electric vehicles, and there should be public depots available for DC fast charging. And the way Revel works, they don't really exclude people from the public coming into their depots. All they do is they offer contractual rates with the ride-hail companies, specifically Uber. And it talks right here about Uber as a partner. And what Uber does is they say, hey, we'll prepay a certain number of kilowatt hours, and this will help you build your network out. And then we're guaranteed a certain rate when our drivers show up to have electricity dispensed. So it's a really win-win situation, and all Revel has to do is keep going. So if they build 2,000 stalls by 2030, and I have been watching Pilot Flying J going to a very similar number, 2,000, and they've been grinding away for years putting in stations. Their stations are a little bit designed for a more retail population, but it takes time to do all that. And let's just say Revel is putting in 20 stalls per station. That's 100 stations that they have to get spun up, and they only have a handful. They have less than 10 right now. I watched them in their alternative fuels data center database, and they're getting one ready in LaGuardia Airport, soon to open, but they'll really have to put the pedal down if they're intending to do 2,000 by 2030. But this is terrific news. Their hardware vendor of choice recently has been ChemPower, a highly reliable choice, and they're guaranteed to have a source of income from Uber, doling out checks in order to get these depots built. And it just makes sense that they could have a singular focus instead of trying to spread and fight against Uber. Now they can instead partner with Uber and Lyft and other rideshare companies that may spring up in the future, and just provide the customized services for the DC fast charging that those owner-operators and companies expect. So it makes great sense, and congratulations to Revel for pivoting in a market that is rapidly evolving. I really think this is going to be terrifically received and wildly successful. Again, reported by Bloomberg today on a wire headline that was released early this morning, 8 a.m. Additionally, the Trump administration has conceded that they need to start writing checks for electric vehicle charging that was approved by the Biden administration. And there's a lot of old Joe bashing in the wording here, which I really don't appreciate. As a Republican, I'd like to see civility in politics if at all possible. But Secretary Duffy is definitely highly contentious in the rhetoric that he uses, unfortunately. But the point is that he's going to start to be writing checks for NEVI stations. And it's not just the companies or the states that got together in order to sue the federal government. This is the entire NEVI program is now getting released to all the states, all 51 states, because they're the district of, or actually 52, because it's the district of the capital, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico are both included in that as well. So all they did is they amended the language of the, what was it? They amended the language of the guidance. That was it, the guidance. So basically, they lost a court case and they had to pay. And what they said is, well, we're going to amend the guidance in order to make. They didn't make it better. All they did is they changed the punctuation a little bit. And so now the states have a little bit more latitude in where they can put these stations. But the point being is the money is going to get dispersed and these stations are going to get built. So stations everywhere. This is just one day. And in one day, we've got just a torrent of money getting funneled into DC fast charging, with Revel burning Uber money, and the federal government starting to write checks for the states to put in electric vehicle charging in their areas. So, all good news. Welcome to NEVI welcome to NEVI to being back. We missed you. It's terrific that you're now back again. And I'm sure Steve at Plug and Play EV, who's been tracking this project very closely, will start doing updates again because it's been a little bit stale. But hopefully now with more regularity, we're going to start seeing NEVI stations under construction and opening. And hopefully Revel 2 is going to start lighting some of these stations. We saw San Francisco, the Mission District station, open not too long ago. And as I mentioned, LaGuardia is coming up in the not too distant future. And then after that, who knows? But the sky's the limit, up to apparently 2,000 by 2030. Exciting times in which we find ourselves, people. Thank you very much for watching.